Welcome to the Podkey summary of Build Agentic App Experiences with the Foundation Models Framework from WWDC 2026. Today's roundup is really about one big theme: building AI apps that stay useful after the first clever demo. The main ideas here are switching models at the right moment, keeping context under control without losing your place, and using a couple of orchestration patterns that make multi-agent workflows feel a lot less chaotic. And underneath all of it, there's a very practical reminder. If you change transcript history carelessly, you can pay for it in speed, accuracy, or both. A big feature in this set is dynamic profiles. The idea is simple and pretty powerful. Inside one language model session, an app can switch models as the work changes. So maybe one phase needs a cheaper model for lightweight back and forth, and another needs a stronger model for a tougher reasoning step. That gives developers a real cost and capability dial instead of treating the whole session like it has to run on one setting forever. The other useful piece is context management. Profiles can trim or summarize transcript history, so a long-running session still fits inside a model's context window. That's basically prompt engineering, but built into the session itself, which is a lot cleaner than manually juggling giant blobs of history every time. Then there's composable dynamic instructions, which feels like a very developer-friendly quality-of-life upgrade. Instead of rewriting the same guidance and tool setup over and over, you can bundle related instructions and tools into one reusable component. So if you've got something like an origami expert, you can inject that expertise wherever it's needed without rebuilding it from scratch in every prompt. What makes it nicer is that these instruction sets can nest. One dynamic instructions object can include another, and the contents are automatically concatenated. That means complex behavior can be assembled from smaller, understandable building blocks, which is usually how software gets less fragile and less headache-inducing. The context story gets more interesting when you look at history, transform versus session properties. A history, transform is local and non-persistent. Before each prompt, it can reshape the transcript for that profile, like pruning irrelevant entries, but it doesn't actually destroy the original history. That's a big deal, because one profile might want a narrowed task-specific view, while another still needs the full record later. Session properties solve a different problem. They're mutable shared state across all profiles, so they're a good place to keep something like a running summary string. The warning here is about the built-in history property. That one is lossy and affects every profile. So if you overwrite it, everybody inherits the consequences. If the goal is profile-specific cleanup without permanently tossing information, history transform is the safer tool. There are also two orchestration patterns worth remembering, because they solve very different coordination problems. First is baton pass. You have multiple profiles sharing one transcript, and a variable decides which profile is active. One profile can hand off control to another through a tool call, and the receiving profile picks up and continues the task. Because both profiles see the full shared history. This works well for stepwise collaboration, where continuity matters. It's the clean handoff version of multi-agent design, which is nicer than having two assistants talk over each other in the same room. The other pattern is phone a friend. That one spins up a short-lived child session with its own isolated transcript. A profile can consult a specialist sub-agent, get what it needs, and keep that side conversation from polluting the main context. The parent still owns the final answer, so the specialization is useful without turning the whole session into a giant mixed-up reasoning soup. Tool calling gets a little more configurable too. There are three modes: allowed, disallowed, and required. That gives developers a straightforward way to match model behavior to the moment. Maybe the UI only wants plain responses right now, so tools are disallowed. Maybe it's a more agentic workflow, and tools are fair game, so they're allowed. And in required mode, the model has to keep making tool calls. That's useful, but it comes with one very practical catch. you need an exit condition. A common pattern is a final answer tool that throws an error to break the loop. It sounds a little weird the first time you hear it, but honestly, a lot of orchestration code gets built out of these oddly elegant hacks. One of the most important caution flags here is about transcript mutation and the key value cache. If you're just appending new messages, cache efficiency tends to hold up. But if you remove or rewrite earlier transcript entries, you can invalidate that cache and trigger latency spikes. So the same context strategy that looks tidy on paper can suddenly make the app feel slower in practice. And this isn't totally uniform across models, which is why the advice is to measure it directly with the foundation model's instrument in Xcode. That part matters because performance folklore is still folklore, even when it's said confidently. All of this leads to the last piece, which is evaluation. The evaluations framework gives teams a way to build evaluation sets and actually test how context strategies affect both accuracy and latency. That includes things like trimming history, summarizing it, or otherwise reshaping the prompt context. And that testing step really isn't optional if you want reliable behavior. Transcript modifications can help, but they can also confuse the model, especially when the app depends on long-running memory and multi-step reasoning. So the takeaway is pretty grounded. Don't guess which context trick is best. Measure it, compare it, and keep the version that actually performs better. Put all of that together, and the pattern is clear. Good agent design is a lot less about one magic prompt and a lot more about managing handoffs, memory, and constraints carefully. The flashy part is the model. The durable part is the session design. And as usual, the humble transcript is doing more work than it gets credit for. This episode was generated by Podkey. Create your own at podkey.fm.